Greetings, everyone. My name is Minister Alicia Teasley, and I'm a minister at Wosay Community Church. And basically, what we're getting ready to do is called pouring libation, and that is basically when we are giving honor, giving thanks, giving respect to those who have come before us, those whose backs we walk on today. Through their stories that inspire us, through their stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, whether through our families or whether we read them in books, or whether we've just had someone to teach us about these great people. This is what we do as an African tradition. It is one thing that we do to honor our elders and those who have come before us. We want to give thanks to the power and the struggle that they've been through, because if not for those people, we would not be standing here doing what we are doing today. So I'm going to open up the libation, and when I say their name, then I'll just say Ashe and then you repeat Ashe. And Ashe just means let it be so, or it gives it extra power. So today I want to pour libation for Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Ashe. Ashe. Today I want to pour libation for Robert Nesta Marley. Ashe. Today I want to pour libation for Toussaint L'Ouverture. Ashe. Today I want to pour libation for Yaya Asantewa. Ashe. Today I want to pour libation for His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie. Ashe. And each one of these elders, these ancestors, have given inspiration in my life. If I'm going through a trial or if I'm going through something, I can reach back and pull upon their stories and feel their power within their spirit and within my spirit to be able to push on and move forward. So I'm going to open it up to the community, and if there's somebody like that in your life, it could be somebody in your family, it could be somebody who you've read that's giving you inspiration, to call out their names.
Henrietta Lax.
Ashe.
Willie Redmond.
Ashe.
Dr. Sabi.
Ashe.
Dr. Francis Cress Wilson.
Yes. Ashe.
Lois Thompson.
Yes. Ashe.
Thomas Sankara.
Yes.
My parents, Emma and Bias Waters.
Ashe.
Dr. Nkrumah.
Yes. Ashe.
Nat Turner.
Ashe.
Dr. Ben.
Yes. Ashe.
Muhammad Ali.
Ashe.
Malcolm X.
Ashe.
Lumumba.
Ashe.
Harriet Tubman.
Ashe.
Maury Turner.
Ashe.
Lillian Murdoch.
Ashe.
My brothers, Alan and Monty Waters.
Ashe.
Marcus Garvey.
Ashe.
Our ancestors at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Ashe. And all those ancestors from the north, the south, the east, and west who have lived this life, fought this struggle, and has passed on their energy, their beauty, their strength, their spirit down to us so that we may pick up the torch and continue the run. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Give thanks.
Thank you. Next, we're in for a hip-hop treat. We have three brothers here called the Conscious Minds. We have Josh Hill, known as Self-Made, Brandon Hiller, known as Hills, and Cameron Lewis, as known for being Mr. Lewis. They are conscious mind using music to uplift and educate our people through these distracted times we are in. They are representing conscious hip hop and people everywhere who can relate to the struggle and still see better for themselves and the world. Now I bring you Conscious Minds.
We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Let me get in my fitted mode. Feeling extraterrestrial. Finna eat me some vegetables. Cause this meat got me skeptical. Healthy mind, healthy body. I'm not trying to be sloppy. Fast food killing everybody. These restaurants, they ain't got me. How I know that I got me? They trying to turn us to zombies. You better read them ingredients. Why they enhancing water? They got me scared for my daughter. That's why we eating organic. God gave us food from the planet. So let us take it for granted and turn it into a habit. They taught us math every year, like our health ain't important. Let's take good care of our organs. If we don't, life is shortened. I know this probably sound foreign, cause you ain't heard this before, but this food for thought, get some more, get some more. We been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life.
I've been living this healthy life. Gotta show, improve, and save lives. We've been eating ourselves to suicide. We gotta stay strong and eat right. They tryna kill us off, genocide. We gotta be one and overcome. My parents been in pain, it's not the same. We gotta eat these greens to operate. Feel this energy we generate. We just move at a different pace. Before I eat this beats, I say my grades. I just pray we have a different taste. We gotta change our ways, it's never late. Change the ways, it's never late. Please don't throw your soul away. I pray we seek a peaceful state. Be conscious what you eating now. This food ain't really normal. They make their own ingredients and label it natural. Let's feed our people knowledge or there will be some problems. I'm worried about the consequences of eating this garbage, and I've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. I just pray that I live twice. Pray that I live twice. I've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. I just pray that we live twice. Pray that we live twice.
We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life.
You are not your body, you a soul of life. Eating healthy, gotta get it right. These fruits and veggies all in the car, so I'm jumping in. Yeah, I need a ride. Natural, no hybrid. Eat meat, no identity. You talk about it, but I live it. This vegan life, I swear I'm really with it. I grab an apple, I'll grab a salad. I swear live all in my fridge. I'm alkaline and you acidic, so you might wanna cross that bridge. You can get sick, but I won't. I think it's time to let go from everything you've been told. Fruits and veggies, emo. Organic, everything, I be up on it. Wake 'em up, I be catching all them snoring. If it's some meat, then it really ain't for me. Been changing my way, so you probably don't know me. Never catch me sipping soda cans. Alkaline, I hope you understand. Healthy life make me wanna dance. I see a couple of y'all on the fence, and my willpower stronger than the beast. I don't follow, I just lead the sheep. And yeah, I'm woke, I don't need to sleep. Alkaline water when I'm in the heat, like I'm catching the sun when it's out, and you looking afraid, eh? The healthy life is what we living, so jump on the wave.
We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life. Living this healthy life. We've been living this healthy life.
Oh, you don't want no steak no more? Oh, you wanted that veggie. You wanted that veggie guy.
We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones. So this is the talk I'm going to give. It's Uprooting White Fragility and the Ethical Foodscape. A Black Feminist Journey Through Food, Ethics, and Race. And this is a work in progress. I'm drawing parts of my book, Recipes for Racial Tension Headache, for this talk, giving it a try, so you can kind of go through a journey of the work I've been doing over the past 12 years. Okay, good. So, as mentioned, I wrote a book, it hasn't been 7 years ago, called Sister Vegan, Black Female Vegans Speak on Food Identity, Health, and Society, that came out in 2010. And it was the first book that interrogated how race, gender, and veganism intersect and inform each other. Now, veganism, if you don't know, is a consumption practice mainly practiced through food in which people do not eat or use anything that comes from animals, like eggs, beef, dairy, fur clothing, fish, leather clothing. I began practicing veganism in 2004 after I was diagnosed with fibroid tumors, and I was introduced to the book Sacred Woman by Queen Afua, an African-American woman and health nutrition guru who draws from Kemetic Egyptian and Afrocentric informed veganism to help cure disease primarily within the African diaspora in the United States. Now, after shrinking my fibroids, I began to wonder what other lies I had been told about not just nutritional and reproductive health in the USA, but everything. I just lost my place. I need reading glasses. I'm in denial. Sorry, 1 second.
We all are.
Okay. And I've never, I rarely read from an iPad, but I realize this is way too small, so let me just put this up closer. I also found it curious that Queen Afua was the first person I'd ever read about who was a black vegan and came from veganism from a decolonizing and race-conscious point of view, with paying particular attention to how health and nutritional philosophies are impacted by antebellum slavery and the continuation of anti-blackness and white supremacy in the United States. During my transition into veganism, all the mainstream vegan rhetoric was post-racial, and the only focus on veganism was supposed to be on non-human animal rights and liberation. Any engagement with veganism from an intersectional approach, that is, asking about race, gender, class, whiteness, etc., was prohibited in this mostly white, masculinist, and mostly financially privilege-dominated thinking space. Such a space was a microcosm of the USA's white supremacist racial caste system. So I love food objects, and I love using such objects such as vegan guidebooks, vegan online forums, cookbooks, and nutritional objects to tell us how white supremacist racial caste system operates, both at the level of individual people who are in collusion with it, who are complicit with it, or resisting it. This evening, I hope to use these objects in order to tell a much-needed story about how anti-blackness, systems of racism, white rage, resistance, and hope, as well as healing, manifest within what I call the ethical foodscape in the USA. That is, the social, political, and economic relationships that are created within these spaces that are dealing with food, ranging from food commodity chains, to community farmers markets, to Facebook groups about ethical veganism, to best-selling vegan recipe books that are focused on ethical eating. Tonight, we'll take a journey through this foodscape and ponder how objects such as the cigar Michael Brown supposedly stole became the measurement of how certain white vegans conceptualize his humanity, or lack thereof. We'll look at how Thug Kitchen Cookbook became appropriated at a minstrel show of a specific black experience, and the white rage or white fragility that the authors and publishers participated in, which is the liberal white playbook of often deflecting the realities of systemic racism and anti-blackness that has pervaded even liberal white cultural spaces for decades. We'll take a visit to a cyber forum about veganism from 12 years ago, in which good and non-racist identified white vegans were engaging in anti-blackness and white supremacy when challenged with the notion that race matters, even in veganism. We'll also look at what does Black Lives Matter look like through the environmental hip-hop work of vegans of the African diaspora, such as DJ Kavam of Denver, Colorado, who raps about gardening and nutritional healing while his wife spins beats and uses a Vitamix blender in the background. Also, we'll take a look at how Trumpisms continue to affect mostly white-identified vegans and how such backlashes or white lashes are potentially signs of the birth pangs of what Dr. Reverend Barber of the North Carolina NAACP calls a third Reconstruction. So I want to start off with this quote. It's part of a paper that me and the executive director of Food First in Oakland wrote. So I'll read it for you. It's a little tiny. Racism. Racism in the food system. Racism is the systemic mistreatment of people based on their ethnicity or skin color. It affects all aspects of our society, including our food system. While racism has no biological foundation, the socioeconomic and political structures that dispossess and exploit people of color, coupled with widespread misinformation about race, cultures, and ethnic groups, make racism one of the more intractable injustices causing poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Racism is not simply added to no prejudice or individual acts, but an historical legacy that privileges one group of people over others. Racism, individual, institutional, and structural, also impedes good faith efforts to build a fair, sustainable food system. So, just want to put that in the background because a lot of folk, depending where I speak, don't actually think about how racism operates within the food system, so I thought this was a good snippet to kind of set the background for what I'm talking about. So the days after the presidential election results, I decided not to engage on social media, in particular Facebook, where anger, blame, and vitriol were soaking up the statuses of nearly everyone. On my Twitter notifications, someone had tagged me and thanked me for allowing Trump to win because I myself had been a third-party candidate representing the Humane Party as their vice presidential nominee, with Clifton Roberts as the presidential candidate. Focused on compassionate intelligence, animal rights, and my framing of justice through a critical race feminist lens, Roberts and I were an anomaly, two black faces on a presidential and vice presidential ticket that not only advocated environmental justice, climate change activism, abolition of the prison-industrial complex, LGBTQ equity, and annihilation of systemic racism, we frame these issues through a pro-vegan standpoint. Now, apparently, some thought that alternative political parties such as the Humane Party and Green Party, as well as bitter Bernie Sanders supporters who voted for Trump as a protest vote, had caused Trump to secure the presidency. Others were reporting that the elections had been hacked by the Russian government, okayed by Putin, and that it was Clinton who had actually won. During the week of Trump's inauguration, Trump made it clear that he would indeed make America great again by implementing cabinet members, policies, and laws that would set us back to a pre-civil rights era, in which the GREAT, his popular slogan, could very well be an acronym for good riddance, equality, and tolerance. I made a little flag because I'm creative like that. And at the bottom it says, because I would love to go back in time and live in the USA when it was great to be a black woman. So on January 20th, 2017, Slate reported, and Slate is a magazine online, quote, the new White House website went live following Donald Trump's inauguration Friday, and it contained a bracing message implicitly directed to supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement. Your kind is not welcome in Trump's America. The Trump administration will be a law and order administration, reads a page on the website titled, Standing Up for Our Law Enforcement Community. It continues, President Trump will honor our men and women in uniform and will support their mission of protecting the public. The dangerous anti-police atmosphere in America is wrong. The Trump administration will end it. End quote. Trump's law and order rhetoric toward groups that are focused on police violence and will not be tolerated during his administration, there's no mention of solidarity with Black Lives Matter or the tackling of racial profiling, which was a complete 180 in comparison to former President Barack Obama, who supported BLM's underlying principles to advocate against racial profiling and systemic-wide racialized violence targeted towards black and brown people. The stance implied from Trump is not surprising at all. Whether pandering to the majority of white America, who actually believes that Black Lives Matter is only about hating white people and hating police, which it is not about, such principles actually show us more to do with America being built on a white supremacist racial caste system than anything to do with anti-police banter, anti-police rhetoric. The cry of law and order as a remedy to obvious decades of anti-blackness, militarized police state, and racism was nothing new within the landscape of the GOP rhetoric and power play strategies. Law and order as a response to racial justice and civil rights activism by those determined to fight their oppression is the playbook that Nixon used to deal with civil disobedience coming from Black Americans and the allies that were protesting violence of racism that secured the power and privilege of white elite like Nixon. One does not have to search too far back in history to see images of Black people being subjected to law and order while they peacefully protest. The hoses, the dogs, the beatings, the killings, batons crushing skulls, being thrown into jail and torture. So even though I've started off talking about Trump, this talk isn't necessarily going to be about Trump. As much as it is will be about the red flags I observed during the past 10 years of scholarship and activism I've engaged in that ultimately shows how Trump's win was the quote-unquote logical outcome that reflects how race continues to matter, and not just politics, but all aspects of life in the USA, including the ethical foodscape, if one just knows how to read the signs. So I just wanted to give a few definitions. So a lot of folk don't know what Black feminist thought is. A lot of people may have some stereotypical thoughts about it, but I just wanted to share this. So U.S. Black feminist thought is a specialized thought that reflects the distinctive themes of African American women's experiences. Black feminist thought's core themes of work, family, sexual politics, motherhood, and political activism rely on paradigms that emphasize the importance of intersecting oppressions and shaping the U.S. matrix of domination. But expressing these themes and paradigms has not been easy because Black women have had to struggle against white male interpretations of the world. So my understanding and search for justice actually started when I was 12 years old and I was called the N-word the first day of junior high in my 99% white, rural, and working class New England town. However, it was difficult for me to find the tools to understand, address, and create a more racially just society until I got into college and discovered the canon of Black feminist theory and critical studies of race in the mid-1990s. I was introduced to Audre Lorde, Patricia Hill Collins, and June Jordan, to name a few, and I learned that they critically employed Black feminist theory and their analytical work, which aims to deconstruct the impact of racism and sexism on the lives of Black women and girls. For them, Black feminist theory is unique to the socio-political experience and collective consciousness of Black females in the United States. Another key focus of Black feminist theory is resistance to inequality from racist and sexist legacies of Black slavery system in the Americas. Katie Cannon defines such legacies as racist, classist, and sexist interactions with the racial status quo, i.e. white, collectively experienced by Black women. Quote, throughout the history of the U.S., the interrelationship of white supremacy and male superiority has characterized the Black woman's reality as a situation of struggle, a struggle to survive in two contradictory worlds simultaneously, one white, privileged, and oppressive, the other Black, exploited, and oppressed, end quote. Collins and Cannon were my aha moment in which I realized there was a name for what I experienced and how I tried to interpret my embodied experience. Since then, I've consciously integrated Black feminist analysis into my activism and scholarship around racial justice, anti-racism, and my burgeoning interest in food and ethics. It was during my tenure at Harvard as a grad student in the early 2000s that I was introduced to the ethical-based philosophy of veganism. And it led me to a journey through an ethical foodscape that, through the tools of critical race theory and Black feminism, would show me how racialization, racism, and whiteness operated amongst those who considered themselves good whites. Good because of their dedication to the rights and alleviation of suffering of animals through their practices of veganism and through their consumption of ethical foods.
Dr. Harper,
Yes?
if we have questions, can we ask questions now, or do we have to wait?
At the end would be.
At the end, okay.
Yeah, so I just always feel like I have to give a huge background.
Okay.
Because I'm writing this book as well, you have to tell me at the end what works and what doesn't work for you.
Okay.
So here's the book that came out 10 years ago, and here's the narrative. I always feel like I need to give a lot of background because I don't want to assume what everyone knows and doesn't know. So in 2004, I entered the mainstream vegan foodscape as a scholar, acutely aware of the fact that my presence, physically and intellectually, did not belong. I was border crossing into white epistemological territory, and the initial responses to my presence made it very clear. And like Collins had stated, I, as a black woman, would be struggling against white supremacist and masculinist interpretations of a vegan world that were confidently masked as universal, objective, civilized, and logical. So while attending Harvard in 2005 as a master's student, I put out a call for papers requesting the voices of black women vegans. I was curious. Would I find that black women vegans collectively take a more race-conscious approach to their practice of veganism in comparison to the mainstream white movement, which appeared to be post-racial? If the collectivity of black feminist scholars were right, I would find that black women's class, racial, and gender positions, to name a few, would reveal us to be aware of how these social locations affect our consciousness. 5 months later, in February of 2006, a person named Herman Thrust posted the request for papers on a vegan forum. Upon checking responses to the request for papers on that forum, I found that my use of the word sister in the call for papers sparked a debate on this forum. More than 40 printed pages of this particular forum discussion was birthed from the use of my word sister when I posted Sister Vegan. Though I did not participate in the discussion, I observed the progression of this discussion for approximately 2 weeks. What unfolded was extensive data that conveyed how systemic racism was performed when certain white-identified cyberspace vegans were confronted with African-American rhetoric, or Black English, in a cyberspace supposedly dedicated to a progressive social justice cause, that being veganism and animal rights. So nearly half of the participants in the discussion expressed their disapproval of the use of the word sister and of non-white people who write or speak non-standard English and or engage in ethnic and racial solidarity. As a cyberspace researcher, the online forum provided me with rich data to add to cybersocial theory around race and whiteness. Simultaneously, as an African American, my lurking was invisible. Therefore, I was able to observe the real or unobstructed views of how certain forum participants felt without them feeling restricted because of my presence. So here's an example of what occurred. There were lots of quotes, but I kind of drew from some of the quotes that really hit me hardest the most. And these quotes, I actually turned into evidence of how well-intentioned white people can produce racist outcomes or racist behaviors, and I turned that into my master's thesis at Harvard. Okay. So Daniel Power's letter was in fact published by Gawker, but it did not get the response and support that he was hoping to get. Jordan Sargent of Gawker posted Power's letter, and Sargent responded in support of Elizabeth. I won't read the whole letter, but I'll read an excerpt. Sargent writes, quote, "But where Power is wrong is in ascribing that dissidence as purposeful. As has been pointed out in basically every piece criticizing Thug Kitchen, the word thug is in the title so that you can think of a mean, scary black person. Thug Kitchen uses thug the same way as Michael Dunn, who shot an unarmed black teenager for playing rap music too loudly. That the voice of Thug Kitchen doesn't match the character they aim to evoke does not exactly absolve them of their intentions," end quote. So yeah, I can understand why the term thug can elicit such pain and suffering amongst a significant number of Black Americans who fear that their loved ones will be perceived as thugs by the white American imagination ensconced in centuries of Negrophobia. In fear and anticipation, many of us Black identified people in the USA wonder if our Black family members and friends will come back home that evening from school or work alive. We think he's late. I hope an officer didn't pull him over and shoot him. I hope he won't end up like Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, or Michael Brown. The book's supporters and post-racial comments by a significant number of mostly white people says a lot. It says, quote, I'm thinking this is what they say, quote, I don't have the trauma of racialized and state violence against my body that black people do and other racial minorities do. Why should I care about the word thug and the racially violent history and recent events such as Oscar Grant, Michael Brown, that trail behind it? As a matter of fact, I don't even have to realize that the term has been racialized and used against murder victims such as Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin to justify their death, because that's what my unconscious acknowledgement of white privilege means. So in October 2014, I searched for book titles with thug in the title on Amazon.com. Over 100 titles came up. 90% depicted black characters on the cover and focused on inner city or urban life. Mostly novels from urban lit genre, it was obvious to me when I typed in thug in the Google search engine, the most popular information that comes up is Tupac Shakur's Thug Life. Shakur writes about what he means when he says thug life, quote, he says, commonly mistaken for a criminal, thug life is the opposite of someone having all he needs to succeed. Thug life is when you have nothing and succeed, when you have overcome all obstacles to reach your aim, end quote. And in a 1994 interview, Shakur sheds more light on how he is evoking the term thug, quote, my mother was a woman, a black woman, a single mother raising 2 kids on her own. She was a dark-skinned and had short hair, got no love from nobody except for a group called the Black Panthers. I don't consider myself to be straight militant. I'm a thug, and my definition of thug comes from half of the street element and half of the Panther element, half of the independence movement, saying we want self-determination. We want to do it by self-defense and by any means necessary. That came from my family, and that's what thug life is. It's a mixture, end quote. So did you hear that? He's talking about Black Panthers and the reality of street life. In this sense, Thug Kitchen authors have appropriated the word and experience of thug life. They have relied on the white supremacist imagination of what thug means. And I want to share with you some of the quotes from their book, or they'll do things like this. If there's a recipe, motherfucking lavender lemonade, calm your bitch ass down like a boss, drink some fucking flowers. So they've relied on this white supremacist imagination of what thug means. So Shakur even talks about how mainstream media have made him and thug negative, as black men who use profanity and do not have much depth or intelligence. When applied to how thug is being experienced by protesting vegans of color, this is what Thug Kitchen feels like to them. Thug Kitchen is a minstrel show of foul-mouthed black people who, when given the chance to create a vegan cookbook, would put in foul language after every other recipe and ingredient. There wouldn't be any depth of the understanding that Shakur and others have, who have the embodied knowledge of thug life. Holloway and Davis's appropriation of the word thug becomes problematic because it's not only erasing the significance of Shakur's thug life essence, it becomes a mockery via how white LA pro-vegan couple thinks or imagines how inner city black people from the hood would communicate culinary ideas around healthy eating. When Tupac talks about obstacles to achieving healthy and economically stable life, he's talking about factors such as environmental race and are in fact non-racist, which is a neutral stance that allows racism and white supremacy to continue being the center ideology of the USA's moral fabric, the political system, the health system, food system, etc. So Thug Kitchen blog and book do not address the lack of easy access to healthy and holistic food life that one finds in the geographies of thug life that Tupac comes from. Such geographies can also be referred to as what geographer Neil Smith calls uneven geographies. Critical race geographers such as McKittrick, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and Clyde Woods have added a racial component to this concept of uneven geographies. Such racialized components show the social and economic devastation that ongoing consequences of neocolonialism fused with white supremacist-based capitalist system have caused within brown and black communities throughout the USA. For Tupac, the strategy in using the words or concept thug life is political and consciousness raising, a way to encompass non-white ways of being and bring forth how a black racialized consciousness impacts ontology within white settler nations like the USA.
The mainstream vegan cultural foodscape, such as Thug Kitchen, had its borders crossed and challenged, and it was clearly not liked by the collectivity of white vegans. And I think about borders, I think about walls, I think about crossing, I think about Trump. While searching through the entire Thug Life cookbook, there were no reflections on racism, food justice, whiteness, privilege, environmental racism, food deserts. None of those keywords came up. Even more interestingly, there is no definition of the word thug or even any reference to Tupac Shakur or similar people with Shakur's thug life experience. Both Dan Quayle, who demonized Tupac Shakur and hip-hop music, and Thug Kitchen, they reinvent thug life in a way that erases Shakur's reality. They replace it with a different type of thug that is embodied and embedded in racial stereotypes about black and brown men. So I'll talk about this later, but my experience with my Sister Vegan call for papers on the vegan forum and the significant number of white vegans who could not be open to the possibility that thug had racist implications resonates with Trump's current slogan of Make America Great Again. And after my experience with Thug Kitchen, I looked toward Black identified vegan men and how they responded to both being racialized as thug and to the geographies of thug lives that make it difficult for either themselves or other Black and brown people who struggle to secure healthy and socially just ways of living. And I think about when I'm in these white vegan spaces trying to do this work, I am constantly receiving backlash about the work I'm doing as an anti-racist scholar. And I'm thinking, make veganism great again, make veganism white again. So before a lot of people of color were doing the type of work I'm doing within academia, which is using scholarship, social sciences, to go into these white spaces and say, hey, you may not be, you know, a neo-Nazi, a KKK member, you may consider yourself a liberal white person, but you're still engaging in acts that collude with systems of white supremacy. And these are the negative consequences. You don't actually have to be a quote-unquote Trump supporter, because that's the stereotype of who's causing a racist system to occur. If you don't have the critical race literacy skills to understand the coded language, the signs, then of course it's going to continue. And of course we get people like Trump and the millions of people who supported him. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I want to talk about what thug culinary cooking and thug life geographies should look like when practiced by Black and brown men who are from these spaces, these embodied experiences. So I don't know why I'm out of line, but okay, great. So DJ Kavem, I don't have enough time to show this, but he is out in Oakland. I actually think I have internet connection. I forgot to set that up, but sorry, he's out in Denver, Colorado. He's anti-corporate capitalist. He has an Afrocentric vegan perspective, and like Conscious Minds, who performed tonight, was that their name, Conscious Minds?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay. He engages in hip-hop ways of teaching about veganism, gardening, and I visited Denver 5 years ago to do a keynote talk about similar to what I'm talking about now, and we were driving through his community who was saying, you know, they're trying to build another prison here, but we have a garden. He talks about how he was part of gangster life much earlier in life, and then he decided to rebuild his community through gardening and veganism. And he has a video, which unfortunately, I don't have it connected to the internet, but it's called G's Up, Hose Down. And it's kind of a play off of Snoop Dogg's music 20 years ago, except for DJ Kavem, he's reappropriating this language. G's are organic growers, and hoes are like the actual equipment used to hoe, you know, your garden. So that's how he's cultivating it. And I'm sorry, if you email my email address at the end of this, I will send you the video. And he also has a video called Wheatgrass. So basically, this is what it looks like. He's actually intersectional in his approach to thug geographies, understanding what it means to actually put together culinary and nutritional recipes and curriculum for people who have this embodied experience of thug life and are living in the inner city or areas where they don't have food and health resources that they need due to the legacies of colonialism, slavery, etc. So that's what it should look like, not just cursing and swearing. This is someone who takes an approach to veganism that's very decolonizing, very race conscious, very community building. So with the Thug Kitchen, it's not that white identified people can't do funny things like that. It's the fact that they weren't conscious of the fact that they were appropriating, that they were kind of making fun of these issues that are very dire in this time, and not to even show any type of solidarity, understand things like Black Lives Matter. That's the problem. DJ Kavum comes from a completely different perspective. He's one of 7 black male vegans I'm interviewing and researching for the book that I'm writing about recipes for racial tension headaches. So let's talk more about the implications of thug and why I find that problematic. So Bryant Terry, he's a cookbook, he's a vegan chef, he's a cookbook writer, he's also one of the few famous black men doing vegan cooking, and most people know him, especially if you're in California. So Terry was not born and raised within hood or thug geographies. However, Terry has this Pan-African consciousness that allows him to see racialized class, food, and health injustice, and the suffering of so many black people in which geographies of thug life creates unhealthy environments, and he wanted to respond to this. So on his Facebook page, he allowed me to post this because it was public, about the same time that there was the thug controversy, also was happening Ferguson, the protests, Michael Brown being killed, and he and I were both on the same types of Facebook vegan pages, mostly white vegans who did not understand the protests, did not understand all of the distress that ended up manifesting a protest, and posting things like, if you're going to steal a cigar, then you deserve to be shot, or if you can't abide by the law, then you should go to jail. And he was just sick of hearing this over and over again from a collectivity of white identified people who are diehard about non-human animal rights, but didn't understand that like the prison system is racialized, and that just adhering to the law doesn't mean you're not going to end up in jail. So he ended up writing this: if you've ever raised hell about animals being killed, and you are not raising hell about the police in Ferguson, Missouri, killing Mike Brown, a child, then using his supposed theft of the cigar to justify said killing, defriend, unfollow me ASAP.
Right.
So, just to give you a background, my specialty, my research, I look at objects and the meaning of those objects, what those objects can tell us in a white supremacist racial caste system. And I was really focused on cigar and the uproar that a lot of people who are ethical vegans and white identified, it's not all white people, but it's a significant number, who are so focused on the cigar. And I thought to myself, what if he had stolen kale, supposedly, or tofu? Objects that have closer proximity to civilized whiteness. What would that mean? And these are just like things I do in my head because I have too much time on my hands, but just joking. But something about the cigar was, that object, it was such an unethical object. It was such a racialized object. It was telling a story in the white imagination that this young man deserved to be shot for stealing. And I wondered, like I said, what if it had been kale? What if it had been tofu? What about that object? And what other objects that are considered more ethical and have closer proximities to civilized whiteness are being constructed in a way that if brown and black people use them, we are seen or treated more with humanity in the white imagination. So these are just things that I'm thinking about while I'm writing the book. And I'm thinking about, was it, sorry if I get the name, there's so many, I'm sorry. Alton Sterling, who was killed? Yeah. And he was selling music, right? CDs? Yes. And once again, black men who, because of the way systems work, being forced into alternative economies to raise money, to get money to feed their families. Like people talking about, why was he selling that? Why was he doing this? And not really understanding those alternative economies. And it was mostly white vegans saying this. You know, what if Alton had been selling kale or tofu on the side of the street? Right. So, you know, and just like thinking about when I hear so much of these comments from well-intended, white-identified people who would never consider themselves racist, would never consider themselves supporters of Trump, saying these things. I already know what this means. That it means that systems of white supremacy are still working very well and very intricately, and almost invisible to the people who would never say that they support what's going on with Trump right now. So I'm hoping I'm making sense. I know I'm running out of time. I'm trying to compress like 2 hours of awesomeness. So, okay, so this is just me to get people to think about meanings of objects, ethical, you know, foodscapes, but also talking about resistance. So I was like sick of this nonsense, and people saying, what does Black Lives Matter have to do with anything, and veganism, like mostly white people, and to give you some information, I spend most of my time in white public universities, those spaces, trying to figure this out as part of my research. So I put together a conference called the Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter, challenging whiteness while building anti-racist solidarity among vegans of color and allies, before, after, and beyond Ferguson. So this took place in 2015, because I was sick of all of these social media showing how mostly white identified vegans really don't understand these things, and at the same time don't consider themselves racist. So some of the questions we asked: what does ethical consumption look like in an era of Ferguson? Can it be a continuum of Black Lives Matter movement and resist neoliberal whiteness and racism? And I asked questions like, what would it look like if we made visible to mainstream vegan USA that the murders of Trayvon Martin, Renisha McBride, Michael Brown, etc., to name a few, are the collateral damages of whiteness? And we had 16 people come and talk to make those connections to people who never really thought about it. We had people talking about, showing a man in prison, a black man in prison, who was milking a cow. Companies, of course, many people know this, companies have contracts with people, with a prison, to hire, not even hire, to enslave people who are incarcerated. So it showed this black man who's incarcerated, enslaved, but also there's the cow who's also getting milk extracted from their bodies. You know, the significance of milk as a marker to whiteness, because you know 90% of black people can't even like digest cow milk. So all of this like coming together, and why Black lives needs to matter in veganism or in the ethical landscape or ethical consumption. So talking about all this stuff, and it went really well. But that's how I resist. Like instead of just going online and responding to the many trolls and angry people, I just put together these conferences and put together these amazing speakers to talk about it. And many people emailed me after the event, mostly white identified, who said it just really opened their eyes. They had no idea until they went to this event and listened and learned. So that's kind of what happened. But there's also the backlash and the what I call white fragility, or white rage, I like it more. Whenever I've been doing this work for 10 or 12 years, constantly getting the backlash, and most of you who do this type of work, you have, I know you've experienced the white rage, the white fragility. If you're not familiar with the word white fragility, it's a phrase coined by Dr. D'Angelo back in 2011. It's when most white people are asked to talk about race, anything dealing with race, acknowledge that racism is a problem. Sometimes there's a violent response, sometimes there's denial, sometimes it's, oh no, you made me feel like a bad white person. Just any way to derail the conversation or make it about whiteness and not about the realities of systemic racism. So I have been dealing with this for like 10 or 12 years now. And in 2016, I was invited to give a talk in the UK to talk about intersectional approaches to veganism. That means like how does race and class and gender shape veganism? And on that page, someone posted all 5 identified white men were really upset that I was invited. They thought that if I came to talk, then no one would be talking about animal rights, because apparently they can't think outside of a one-dimensional space. And they were very upset about the implications of me coming to speak along with another black woman who would speak about intersectional approaches to anti-racism and veganism. So what it made me think about was it made me think about Trump and his, like I said, make America great and white again rhetoric. And these comments from these white vegan men made me think that they were essentially saying, make veganism white and great again. And this framework is cut from the same cloth, though I'm quite certain these men would never want to associate themselves with the fabric of Trump. So I made this little poster, what Trump ideologies look like amongst good vegan whites in the ethical foodscape. And it says, veganism should always trump intersectionality. And I said, make veganism great again. And I put a little bunny there. And I said, society for bunnies against intersectionality. And yes, I upset people, but it's just, that's what it felt like. And I started thinking about Trump and building a wall and border crossing. And I'm like, but I'm doing the exact same thing. And these particular people are really irate about it. So what's going on here? So, you know, I'm thinking about what's happening with Trump, how he had gained all that momentum, and a lot of my liberal white colleagues and friends who never considered themselves racist were confused how this had happened. Yet at the same time, I'm thinking all the times I pointed out, this is how it's happening. This is how it's happened. Why haven't you been paying attention? And then when Trump finally won, I got a lot of people writing me, oh, that's why you've been doing the work you've been doing for the last 12 years. That's what you meant. That's what you meant. So it's interesting. So what's going on here? Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Barber of the North Carolina NAACP. Okay, so he's talking about, like, a lot of what's happening that seems like chaos right now may very well be the birth pangs of a third Reconstruction. And that's what, like, a lot of us are experiencing right now. Are people familiar with the history of America, USA Reconstruction? Okay, so usually when there's advances in any type of racial rights progress, looking at non-white people as humans, there's the white backlash. So, I'm sorry, there's a white backlash, but there's still progress. So we make progress. So right now, there's the theory that there all this chaos and bigotry. It's kind of a optimistic sign that we're entering yet another Reconstruction, and that things hopefully are going for the better. And I know I'm here today also to talk about kind of the health and healing aspect and what I've been doing. So a lot of us go through racial battle fatigue trying to do this work. And if you're not familiar with that, it's microaggressions that we experience as well as macroaggressions that are subtle, cumulative verbal and nonverbal acts ranging from slights to insults and stigmatizations that target race, gender, class, religion, etc. An academic called William Smith came up with the term racial battle fatigue to describe the psychophysiological symptoms from high blood pressure to anxiety to frustration, shock, anger, and depression that people of color may experience living in and navigating historically white spaces. So according to researchers, symptoms of racial battle fatigue include, but are not limited to, loss of sense of control, insomnia, rapid mood swings, like I said, high blood pressure, ulcers, and other stress-related symptoms. And the authors suggest that stress from racial microaggressions can become lethal when the accumulation of physiological symptoms of racial battle fatigue are untreated, unnoticed, misdiagnosed, or personally dismissed. And the sufferer of RBF may feel haunted by his or her perceived discrimination and suffer from multiple mental health issues. But how do we attend to each grievance, imagined and perceived, real and relentless, to prevent the ongoing violences toward us and our bodies? So I want to actually talk about what I do, which is finding community, which a lot of people already have, but how I use food.
Okay, we can take
I have one,
break.
yeah. Okay, good. I had actually questions for the audience to talk to people, but if there's not enough time for that.
No, then you'll come back.
Yeah.
Part two after we're done.
Yeah, so okay,
Right.
good. I was trying
Okay.
to make the time, so sorry, I was looking at my time.
Okay.
So I have questions for folk after
Yes,
this
yes.
to kind of think about all the stuff that I was talking about, and questions to kind of talk about like the healing and resistance.
Awesome.
It's just the universe.
This one's called Universe. I know y'all probably know this one. The beat at least.
It's just the universe. We can't connect if we try. It's just the universe. No, but it's just the universe. We can't connect if we try. It's just the universe. No, but Dark matter is in me, I'm feeling reconnected. All the stuff that I talk about, they can navigate it. It's in my DNA written, it's all energy. The answers are on the soil, it got me feeling free. It got me feeling like I need to make a plan and leave. Man, I'm just judging off the fruit that I got off the tree. I've been into it no different, but now I see the difference. I understand that we need the sun, that's my only interest. Photosynthesis feeding me where you get your food. Every time the winter hit, it get me out the mood. Out with nature is the origin where we resonate. This is where we get solutions, can we demonstrate? This is where my genetics feel the most away. It's hard to be yourself when everything around you fades. No more GMO, my melanin ain't feeling that. Get the mucus off the body, find a way about the try. We can connect if we try. It's just the universe. It's just the universe. We
can't connect if we try. It's just the universe, no you but I. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We connected to the cosmos. This is what I'ma die for. And we connected to the cosmos. Oh, this is what I'ma die for. Thank you so much, thank you, thank you.
Could you elaborate? I know you asked if people understood Reconstruction. And I'm going to say I'm not quite clear because I've heard different definitions.
Okay.
And could you briefly describe that and then why this would be considered a third Reconstruction?
Okay. So I'm trying to do this one.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Like history. So after the end of antebellum slavery, and black people were free, there was this push to make sure that black people are treated better, to become more self-sufficient, and you know that's progress, a certain type of progress. So black people are not enslaved anymore. And then there is the backlash, the white lash of anger that black people are now free, and what are we going to do? How are we going to build our economies if we don't have people who are enslaved? One of the examples of Reconstruction happening and there being backlash, I don't know, did anyone watch the movie Rosewood? Are you familiar with the town Rosewood, which was okay? So that's like that was the good things that happened on Reconstruction in the black communities that came together. Cities, everyone is more financially secure. They're doing their own thing, and this happened a lot throughout the United States. So that's Reconstruction. That's the benefits of Reconstruction. Then there's the backlash. So mostly white people going and burning down towns, kicking black people out, killing black people because they want things to go back the way it was during anti-black.
The reestablishment of the KKK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a huge upsurge in white nationalist parties and stuff like that.
And kind of what period was that?
Okay, so
time-wise.
Time-wise, at the end of slavery.
1865,
okay.
1870s, 1880s,
yes, and then the early part of the 20th century,
okay.
I believe. Sorry. And then we're talking also about now, which is there's been lots of progress in the post-civil rights era, so just like lots of progress that's been made, not just in terms of racial equity and equality in the United States, but other forms of equalities for women, for people with disabilities. There's all this progress. And then we have the election of a black president. And then now there's this white rage or white lash that's happening again when you saw the momentum that Trump built, but he didn't come out of nowhere. It was like lots of millions of white identified people mostly who want things to be back the way, like make America great again, be back in the day, right? Where black people and most people who weren't white, financially privileged men viewed their place. So I don't know if I...
That's what you're referring to. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, Dr. Harper. I think we have to inform the Europeans, or may I say the Caucasians. Without the black man, there will be no Caucasian. Slavery have dominated everything. Therefore, like Paulo Ferry said, we contradict everything. Because without the black man, there will be no white man. So the black man today have to be confident and conscious and that without him or her, there will be no Caucasians. So the Caucasians have to work with the black man for the purpose of unity. Because everything is done based on slavery, 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 slavery. There were more Caucasian slaves than the black slaves. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. And this is like the history of white, are people familiar with the history of white people and white indentured servants that also came to what's now the United States? And that for a long time, who would be considered white now, but weren't back then, who worked with people who were from Africa, and that they were together, and they were actually going to build power and momentum together. And then those who were the white slave masters, ruling elite, they decided to let these certain Europeans into the whiteness club, and to kind of disenfranchise the power that the indentured European servants and black slaves were getting working together. So, yeah, it's interesting history. So, yes?
You know, what you were saying is right about Rosewood. During that time, a lot of times, during that time, they would say, okay, it says, build your own everything, build your own everything. And what we did, we built banks, we had banks, mortuaries, and everything. Everybody was happy, and that, but then again, a lot of white folks would say, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be. So there was this dynamic, but it's contradictory at the same time. And this is what we're going through right now. They told us to get, I remember, I came up on the 50s and the 60s, okay? So I can tell you, I lived through a lot of this stuff, you know? And they said, okay, you can do this and you can do that. So we went to college, got educated and stuff like that. Now it's like, oh, you're not supposed to be on par. In other words, I might respect you, but you are, like Lincoln says, no black man would ever be better than a white man. You see, in other words, like you were saying, sometimes you want to be nice and liberal, but sometimes you don't realize that you've been conditioned of being in the forefront of everything. And a lot of times you do it sometimes unconsciously. You think that you're superior. You know what I'm trying to say? You know what I mean? Like, you know, and you don't really realize it because that's the privilege. You really don't realize what you're doing, like, you know what I mean? And this is really good for a lot of people. And it's good for all races of people. This is how we'll get respect. You see? So long as you think that you're here, I mean, I like you and you're nice and all, but I still think that I'm better than you.
This particular marginalized community, like black Americans, collectively have been affected negatively by colonialism and racism, and now we can see it in how it's harder for this community to access better health, better food. PETA doesn't take any of that into account. They're just looking at and assuming this one-dimensional approach. It's easy to go vegan because we're assuming everyone is white, able-bodied, and middle class. Does that make sense? So that's what I mean. So that's how I intersect it. It seems like common sense for most people who aren't that, but for the mainstream who have the most power and resources like PETA, I mean, they get millions of dollars, they continue to do campaigning and promoting their work through that one-dimensional lens. And they're not interested in being in solidarity with or taking a different approach that isn't just about centering their whiteness within veganism. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at, but also, you know, there are people that, and like I said, I spend most of my research in mostly white areas where, you know, they're like, we're going to do food justice, but they go out and it's white identified people using like colonialistic language, talking to people of color as if we're children and we don't know how to be healthy and eat right. And I have to say, you know, even though you're trying to get people to eat ethically, you're using language that is highly colonialistic, and you're talking to people of color as if they're children and need the help of white saviors to get them to a certain point. That's what I mean. Does that make sense? Yeah, so yeah, you can go and eat organic or you go to the store, but I'm interested in how we're all affected living in this white supremacist racial caste system, even when we're interested in doing things like ethical food. And that most of the mainstream, because it's unconscious, disconscious, and there's still well-intended white people doing it, there's negative consequences when they're still one-dimensional and they assume, well, isn't everyone else like us?
Right.
And there's negative consequences. Like the couple that put together Flood Kitchen, they weren't trying to be appropriating and racist. They had no idea, but they lack that racial literacy because of white privilege to know what it even meant to engage in this thing called FUD. And then when they were called out on it, instead of becoming an ally and helping to create more ethical landscapes, foodscapes, they became defensive and like fragile. And that's the problem. Instead of actually owning it, they became fragile. And that's one of the biggest problems, is that a lot of people, like you mean I'm not good, I'm not moral, and then you start taking it, you're defensive instead of thinking this is an opportunity to learn. You know, even though I'm not outwardly a white racist, I benefit from a systemically racist society. Even though I'm not, you know, I'm not homophobic and beating up gay people, we live in a society that privileges people who are straight. So how are my ignorances around that negatively affecting gay people? Like, it goes to all the different levels of privileges, if you think about it. Like, I speak English as a first language. I don't hate people who don't speak English as a first language, but if I'm not aware of the hate against people who speak Spanish, not necessarily French or German, but like something about hate people who speak Spanish in this country, people speaking Arabic. Like if I'm not aware of that, and then I create veganism that assumes everyone speaks English, I'm going to marginalize people who don't speak English as a first language. So it's like all about that self-awareness and intersectional approaches to justice. Like you can't end racism unless you understand how all those isms work together, and you have to be conscious of it. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm using food to talk about it, but this, you can talk about this in any space. It can be about education or health or sports. It happens everywhere. I'm just using, because my talks are not about veganism. It's just about the white supremacist racial caste system and what we need to be doing right now if you're serious about like dismantling everything. That's what I talk about. Yeah. So, but thanks for asking the question, because that makes me realize I need to make that more clear when I give these talks.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you revisit? You talked about George Yancey,
yes,
and how he perceived, his perception of the black consciousness or white consciousness is about black. Could you kind of touch on that a little bit more, George Yancey?
Yeah, let me just, because he's okay. So
he's the author that you talked about.
Yeah, I know. Let me just go to the quote. So let me see if I can do that. I have to find this. So, are you talking about George? Yeah, okay. Is this what talking about this conscious racism? You know?
Yes.
So, okay. So we're talking about like, okay, so George Yancey, he is one of the few black Americans who are he's in the philosophy, European-based philosophy departments in predominantly white institutions. It's very rare to find black people there doing critical race engagement with philosophy. So he talks about how, like, you know, like similar to what I talk about, not most goodwill white people aren't thinking they're racist. But, you know, he talks about him as a black man. You know, I'm walking down the street, and a lot of white people, they're not conscious of it, but their bodies will tense up and they start getting fear because of me as a black man walking down the street. It's disconscious. And it's somatic. It's like it's deeply in your body. Like the way you respond, it's negative. It's obvious you are scared of me as a black man. You may not even be conscious that that's what your body is doing. So he talks about this deeply rooted somatic fear that a lot of white America, even the most well-intentioned white people have. And they're not even conscious of it. And that it influences how they respond to those who are not white. And like I said, most of it is disconscious, and it's like deeply embedded in their unconscious, and it comes out whether like physically or, you know, ways that have racist impact, but they're just not aware of it. So he's talking about, Yancey talks about racialized consciousness, so white racialized consciousness. When you are racialized into whiteness, when you're socialized into whiteness, your brain is going to function in a way that reflects that. And there are certain stories and certain things that you have been told that are scary about certain non-white people. And that is going to deeply affect how you engage with your environment and people who are not white. So that's what he does. I'm trying to, like, he's written tons of books. Just look him up, George Yancey. And he talks about that, like the deeply, like, disconscious somatic way that a lot of white people are not even, they don't even realize that. They can even read about critical race theory. They can think, they can be anti-racist activists and still have that deeply somatic fear of the other. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I'm just sorry, because you were talking a lot. I just want to make sure that other people also get a chance to ask questions, okay? Because I'll give you my email if you have other questions to email me. If you can just let other people ask questions.
I was trying to explain what the question he asked, how Caucasians think. They think of ownership. When you think of ownership, your consciousness tells you exactly what to do and how to think. If you don't have no ownership to anything within the environment that you live, your consciousness is different. So the Caucasians have ownership, and this is what makes them think the way they think. They have inherent privilege that we do not.
Yeah, so that's
what
yeah, so that's like the concept of white racialized consciousness. Okay. So, yes.
I heard you say the term white identifier. I'm just wondering if you could say more about that.
Yeah, so just there, like I can read, I can think I know how someone identifies, and then there's actually how they identify. So, you know, there are, okay, so like, so your skin color doesn't necessarily mean you're going to identify with that. So there are people who look white, but they say, no, I'm not white. You know, I identify as Chicana, I'm not white. And then there are people who are Chicana and say, I don't identify as Chicana, I identify as white. So it's like, not just about the way you look, but I can think that someone is, oh, that person's Chinese, or that person is white, but they actually may think of themselves completely differently. So I use the word identify, like I'm a black identified person. But there are plenty of people I meet who have my skin color and do not identify as black identified.
And this is a follow-up ethical question. Do you think white people should identify as white, or maybe something else? Would that be helpful or not?
I don't know. I think it's very deep, and it's about also like where your mind is, what your political affiliations are. I think it's interesting that if somebody does not identify as white, but is read as white and receives privileges because they are read as white in society, I think people should own that.
Jonathan Bloomberg, he was a psychiatrist. He told us to write black people out of this.
Oh.
You know, he's a German.
Okay.
Him and a couple of more psychiatrists.
Okay.
Also, this guy, Levinsky, who worked on the cottage industry to keep us divided from the black people in Africa and the rest of the world. Yeah. And if it wasn't for Alexander Pershing, he'd be speaking French, because he's the African that created the modern Russian language.
Right.
Yeah. So he's together on his own story. You know?
And also I may add Eisenhower. Eisenhower's wife is a Malian lady, have 6 boys.
Eisenhower was half black.
Yeah, exactly. But we never considered them black.
No, he was a mulatto.
One of the grandsons just died last year, 92 years old.
Okay.
Lincoln is a brother.
Well, there's a lot of white. Yeah. There's a lot of people
Just history were not properly taught. But we have to start from the beginning. We can't jump in the middle thinking we're going to go to the end. No, the beginning is where all of us have to start from. Then we can understand that you can put grandmama in the closet and lock the door. The DNA is in you. I have a student that looks like is a Caucasian, but he has 25% Africans in him. And nobody called him that. But he knows he has. It's the DNA is the key.
I know it's getting close to around 70. Do you have some last that you wanted to sum up?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So these are good questions, and let me just get all this started, okay? Oh, sorry. My husband was trying to contact me about how I get back to where they are. So here.
Should we give him direction? Does your husband have
his phone was about to die, and I was like 15 minutes ago. It's probably already dead.
Oh, okay.
So here, if you have more questions, please feel free to ask me. Like, remember, this is a book and ideas in progress. So, I mean, this book is not coming out for like another probably 2 years. So these are ideas I'm thinking through and bouncing off. Like, I don't have the answers to everything. Remember, my perspective is just one of like 7 billion, and then plus those that have come before. So, yeah, mine's just one perspective, you know. So if you have questions, you can email me, sistavegan@gmail.com. Okay.
I just want to I know we're talking about racism a lot. There's a book called The Myth of Race by Robert Sussman. It's a very good book to talk about, you know, how and why we even use race to even deal with people. When, you know, before that, it was always based on your nationality or what culture that you practice. So it'd be a good read for any people that are trying to figure out how we even got to racism in the first place. The Myth of Race, Robert Sussman.
How do you spell his last name?
Sussman.
Yeah, so thank you, and I just want to let people know, like, this is complex stuff, and like, even within the discipline that I'm in, there's a lot of us don't agree with each other in what we're doing. So I'm like I said, I'm just one person, this is my perspective, and from what I've learned, and hopefully some parts are helpful in trying to put this puzzle together so we can all join in dismantling all of these systems of oppression. Like, that's the point. So draw from what you can from what I have to offer, if it helps you with this like struggle, you know, as a person who is a person of color doing it, or a white ally. Seriously, that's what I want to end with. So, you'll send me a message. I have 4 kids under the age of 8, so if I don't respond, it's because I have 4 kids under the age of 8, and I'm busy, I'm sleepless because I have a newborn, but I care and I'll respond to you like within 2 to 3 weeks.